Good evening, Africa. Good evening, African Confessions. I am back with another episode. In this episode, I am going to share with you a message, and it is a translation of a message that I received earlier on. The message reads like this: Hello, my brother, how are you? The reason why I became a ritualist, it was that I had bought a truck and I was competing with very big companies, because for you to get paid very well when you have trucks, you need to have trucks that are doing cross-border, and I was not able to get those loads that pay very well, so I ended up sacrificing 7 of my drivers. My brother, I want to confess that I am a ritualist, and I became a ritualist after I had bought my first truck. What happened is that I was working for this other big trucking company. I was a truck driver whilst I was in South Africa. After becoming a truck driver, I worked for that company for 6 good years, and I was saving a lot of money, and I managed to buy my own truck. But I kept on working for that company, and on the other side I had my own truck which was on the road, and it had another driver. I kept on working for that company, and on the other side my truck was also getting some loads. When lockdown arrived, I bought another truck. That was my second truck. Then when I saw that now I had 2 trucks of my own, I stopped working because I wanted to manage my trucks and also to look for loads for my trucks. What I did is that I then went back to Zimbabwe. Then when I had returned back to my country, things were not good for me. My life just turned upside down. What would happen to me is that I'll send a driver to go and pick up a load. Then when the driver delivers that load, sometimes those people would refuse to pay me the rest of the money. So I'll see that I'll have spent so much money on diesel and other costs like toll gates and the money that you pay at the border. At the end of the day, I was just working for nothing. When I saw that I was working for nothing and I had so much bad luck, I didn't know why people kept on scamming me. So I spoke with other truck owners because I wanted to understand how they were keeping their trucks running, because as for me, I was not making any profit at all. Yes, my trucks were always on the road, but most of the times I was just operating at a loss. There was no profit. So I spoke with this other truck owner. Then he said to me, being in the trucking industry is the same as being in the taxi industry. People have to fear you. If people don't fear you, they are going to take advantage of you. That person then gave me a piece of advice. He said to me that you have to find something that is going to make people fear you. That man then gave me directions to this other man that I'll call uncle. I'll just say uncle even though I am not related to him. When I went to this uncle, he then gave me some herbs. He told me that this herb that he had given me, what I was supposed to do is that I was supposed to take that herb and to place it in the truck, the first truck that I had bought whilst I was still in South Africa, and that is what I did. But that uncle had promised me that that herb that he had given to me, it was not going to need blood or anything. It was just a simple herb. So I took that herb, then I went and I placed it inside that first truck that I had bought whilst I was still in South Africa. He had given me an instruction, and the instruction was that I was supposed to hide that herb inside the truck where the driver could not find that herb, and I did that. He told me that after that truck had gotten its first load, I was supposed to remove that herb. Then I was supposed to flush that herb in the toilet. And that is exactly what I did. When I had finished flushing that herb, jobs started coming to me. And when lockdown ended, I had 10 trucks in my name. After that, I had so much money. I was making money left, right, and center. And my loads were being paid in time. Those guys that used to scam me before, they were the ones that were paying me in time. I was so surprised. But then it all started like a funny thing. My first driver, he just had an accident and he died on the spot. And when my driver died on the spot, it was him and his wife, because he was carrying his wife in my truck. So they both died when my truck had an accident. But what troubled me is that there was this other day after my truck had an accident and my driver and his wife had died. I was at my office, so I went into the toilet. When I got into the toilet, I saw that there was money in the toilet. There was heaps and heaps of money. I took that money and I used that money for my businesses. But what happened is that that same truck that I had bought whilst I was still in South Africa, this truck has been involved in so many accidents. So many drivers have died whilst they were driving that truck. Now I can count that it has been 7 drivers that have died whilst they are using my truck. When I saw that now it was the 4th driver that had died and it was just a minor accident, but that driver just died, I went back to that uncle. I told him that, look, that thing that you gave me, I think that it is the one that is killing my drivers. He then told me that you are supposed to go back and to remove that herb from the truck. So I called the driver. I told him that he had to come back to the garage with that truck. He then took another truck. I started to search that truck looking for that herb, because uncle had told me that when I find that herb, I should go back to the village where I was born so that I can bury that herb, because now people were suspecting this same truck, it had been involved in so many accidents, and each and every driver that had been involved in an accident whilst driving that truck, he had died on the spot. Now it was 7 of my drivers that had died, and people were talking. When I looked for that herb, I never found it. Maybe one of my drivers had come across that herb and they had thrown it away. I went back to that uncle to inform him that, look, uncle, I can no longer find that herb that you had told me that I should hide in that truck. When I told him this, he said that it means that there is no longer a solution to my problems. I just have to accept that this is the way things are going to be. After I had returned from consulting that uncle, I went back to my garage and I told myself that if this truck is the reason why all of my drivers are dying, let me just park this truck. No one is allowed to drive this truck anymore. So I parked that truck aside and I told all of my drivers that no one is allowed to touch this truck anymore. But the moment that I made an announcement, all of my drivers started to call me one by one. Some of them, they were at the border gates whilst they were getting cleared at customs. One would call me saying that, boss, the gearbox is damaged. Another one would call me and tell me that, boss, I am stuck, the gearbox is damaged. All of my trucks in one day, they got damaged with the same problem. It was just a gearbox problem. When I saw that this was happening to all of my trucks, I became so scared. I ran away from my garage. Then I went and I started to stay at my lodge. My brother, now it has been 2 months since I have been staying at my lodge because I have my own lodge. I don't know when last time I saw my wife. I am just staying at my lodge. And if I have to tell you the story about how I built up this lodge, my brother, there are some rituals that I did, because when I started to build this lodge, there was so much competition. I went back to that uncle to consult with him. I told him that, uncle, I am building this lodge, but there is so much competition. I don't know if I am going to make any money out of this business, or maybe I have just wasted all of my money. He told me that this what you want to do, I will tell you everything that you can do so that you can get customers. But if you perform this ritual and if this ritual backfires on you, please count me out. My hands are clean. He then told me that I had to drive back to the village where I was born. When I had arrived in my village, he had told me that when I had arrived in the village, I was supposed to go on my grandfather's grave. Then I was supposed to get some soil from that grave, then return back to the city. After I had collected that soil from my grandfather's grave, I returned straight to the city. At that time, the contractors were busy with the foundation. So what I did is that I took that soil, then I started to sprinkle that soil in the foundation before those guys had poured concrete in the foundation. Then I left. That is why, my brother, I have been staying at my lodge for the past 2 months, because that is the only place where I can feel safe like this, because there is a voice that speaks with me. The voice sounds as if it is my own grandfather, but I have never met my grandfather. Growing up, our grandfather had already passed away. There was this other day I wanted to leave the lodge, but as I was getting into my car, driving my car, there was a voice that told me, go back to the lodge. So I ignored that voice. But after I had kept on driving, I saw that suddenly on the dashboard there were a lot of stones. So I got scared and I ran back to the lodge. My brother, this is the problem that I am facing. Dear listeners, right there was a message that I received from Anonymous. Then we tried so hard to translate this message, hoping that you understood it. Let's meet again in the following episodes.